Welcome to Bold Encounters. Today we're talking about goals, and we are going to focus on some superpowers. Space. We're going to talk about the imagined space for a second because you're going to need it beyond your sense scope. And it involves the amygdala, but it also involves a ton of your prefrontal cortex activity. And, people and places can be imagined. What's more amazing, maybe there's a lot of animals with great memories. We have a terrific memory because of our value stamp. But we can do something that's incredible. We can actually, in time frame, because we relate time and space, we can actually close our eyes. We can see beyond those mountains. And I can imagine an important place where there's people doing important things, and it hasn't even happened yet. And I can maybe orchestrate that happening. So our imagination can create an imagined space and leave our outward space to things we can't even see, haven't ever thought of or seen in work life or in technology or ones and zeros. And we can imagine something outside of that. And we can imagine that point. And that point can become a target. What you can do if you picture things in your mind, you get to create mental simulations. And the detail matters. Now, the detail of facts and the people and the setting and the action and all the things that are part of a scene are incredible elements to pay attention to. However, this is a really interesting finding, and this is verified by neuroscience. And what it is that if you imagine the feelings, the positive outcome and the importance of that distant goal, it will help you achieve it one time. Here's the problem. Often people, every time they go think about taking a step, will picture that distant goal and feel how good it's going to feel. That's actually a problem because you're not focused and you've reallocated and you've calmed yourself and you're trying to ready your systems to take the next step. And so what's important is to keep your eye on the finish line, but only factually, not to rehearse or reminisce about the idea and load all the feelings of premature celebration in your mind. That's actually a detriment to achieving that long-term goal and even your short-term step. So don't do that. What's even more interesting to me, and it makes a lot of sense, okay, picture the celebration party one time so you can be clear about the vision. But then every time you think about this, think about it factually and think about let the value stamp and assessment of where you are and where you want to be, the emotion be about where you're short and where you want to be. Now this sounds like it's going to be depressing. It's not, actually. People that know they have a path set up, know the things they have to accomplish, have a big advantage getting over their any negative feelings and such. And so what you want to do is you actually want to picture the consequences of not taking the next step, the consequences of not achieving that ultimate goal and the intermediate goals. Because when you think of the consequences and the outcomes that could happen if this very important thing doesn't get done and this very important step today doesn't get done, it's like creating a tiger. The negative set of emotions is like a tiger pushing you, making you take the step. And so now you've actually put out there something you intellectually know will be great, but you're not there yet. And you're assessing your current state as not there yet. And then you're loading in your thought a tiger behind you that will chase you towards it. Now you're not only ready and anxious to go, but you're got a little bit of fear that's positive and it's not a fear about general life or the other things that you're fearing. It's a fear about that not taking that step. And if you take that step, you actually will have some motivation to get there. Okay, let's talk about Walter Payton. Sweetness. Walter Payton was the best running back to ever play the game of football. He was my hero as a young person. And as I got into professional ranks and I was publishing a magazine, I had the opportunity to go interview Walter Payton. And I was late. And here's this man that was known for his vision and his visionary running and his focus and his personalized impact. And I was late. And we had a cell phone, luckily, and I was 3 hours late, ultimately, after a lot of traffic and a lot of toll booths in Chicago. And I called his assistant and I said, I'm so sorry. You know, you and I have talked a lot. I'm dying to see his office. Can I just come? He had retired. He didn't need to meet with me. I was nobody. I was just publisher of a 150,000 reader magazine, not Forbes. And he just left, went home. And I said, well, can I come? She said, yeah. So I went. And I drove to that office and I went in and she said, you are not going to believe what's going on. And I said, what? She said, he's coming back. I said, for me? She said, yeah, he's coming back for you. He didn't need to do that. He didn't need to do it for him. He didn't need to do it for me. Wow, he's coming back? Yeah, he's coming back. And we spent that evening talking, Walter and I. One of the greatest moments of my life, really. And I was sitting in front of that best ever person, and I said, so when you set out, what were you thinking about? What were you trying to accomplish? And he said, you know, I envisioned being the best ever. I envisioned winning a Super Bowl, and not just hoping, but getting done what I needed to do to win a Super Bowl. And I envisioned being the best teammate, and I envisioned contributing to the community that I ended up with. And I made a plan, and I accomplished it. I took every step. And I said, well, tell me some of the things that were involved with your plan and how you trained and such. And he points to the picture behind him in his office, big picture of a small mountain. Anyone who knows about the Bears or football or even NFL probably knows what this mountain is. But this mountain was a mountain that Walter ran up many, many times every single day. He said, I ran up that mountain every single day, and I did it so many times that I brought some of the best NFL people. I won't mention their names, but he listed all these players that are well known for being amazing football players, amazing training people, and they couldn't hang with him. He went every day. He ran that mountain, which struck a nerve with me. I heard that comment, and I had to ask. I said, Walter, look, I was not a serious football player. I was a high school football player, but I did start. I was a captain, and I had a hill that was very steep next to my home. There's only two houses. It was actually one house away. And at the first of the season, I'd run it a couple of times. And look, I'm not Walter Payton, and I had no chance of being a professional football player, I didn't think. And after 2 weeks, I just quit because I was a starter, and we didn't have a good team anyway. And I was kind of confessing to this best ever running back my weaknesses as a player back as a young teenager. And I said, this is the question. Did you really run it every day? I mean, didn't you get sick? And that silence was his answer. Silence. And I said, I didn't know what to do. So I kind of reformulated the question as though I needed to explain it better. And I said, so what I mean is, like, you know, people have really bad diseases at least once in life. And you know, you're probably throwing up and other things, and it probably would be very difficult to get to the hill that day. Didn't you just miss a day? And a much longer dead air than I just allowed was the answer. And so I had to ask it the third time, and I asked it a third way, and he snapped at the end. And he goes, Mark, you don't become the best ever by skipping a day. Let me say that sentence again because it's stuck with me for 20 years now. My dear friend, the listener, you don't become the best ever by skipping a day. Now, I've never had a vision. I've never looked beyond the horizon like Walter did and said, I want to be the very best at that ever. Maybe until now, later in my life. And he stuck something in my head that has helped me many times not be the best ever, but be better than I was. You don't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish by skipping a day. And if you're somebody who wants to balance life, you don't skip being a great father or wife or mother or husband or whatever by skipping a day. You don't become a great student by skipping a day. You just don't. I happen to believe that there's a lot of value in a day of rest and a lot of reflection. It's kind of the exercise we did. I think you don't skip any of the 6 days and you do take a rest. It's like going to the horizon and looking broadly and becoming aware and gaining perspective. Now, I don't know how he did it, but Walter gained a perspective that was community-based, even without skipping a day, but he did it. And that's why they called him sweetness. He also, in a physical sense, did something that is a great metaphor for what we're talking about in this whole conversation. I said, what else did you do besides run that hill to train? He goes, well, I wasn't much for weight rooms. I really wanted to build natural strength. So he did all the things we're used to, the sit-ups, the push-ups, the pull-ups, all those things. But he invented ways in different times of the day to challenge his body and build strength in every single muscle in natural ways without relying on the artificial weight room setup, which I thought is brilliant, a really interesting thought. And I said, what else did you do? And he said, well, I used to run through the grove of trees back in the field behind my property. And I said, you did what? And he said, I would sprint through the grove of trees for obvious reasons. It trains you, and I would do it I would force myself to do it, take a different path every time, because it trains you with spatial awareness, and it gets you ready to miss and dodge, and it helps you accelerate off a cut. And I would time myself, and I said, well, did you ever hit a tree? I'm not answering that, and he wouldn't answer me that. But his ability to have spatial awareness and vision down the field and the power of his body. And I shook his hand that day. It was like shaking a pork roast. It was so strong and big. His hand was huge and he was barely taller than I am. And he was so powerful that he created a saying, and when he was ending a run, and he was clearly going to be tackled, he decided to push that player as many yards as he could. And he called it never die easy. And he would hit them so hard, most often, more aggressively and harder than that person would hit him. And he would gain a couple extra yards every single time. And he called that never die easy. Now, the ironic part of that whole interview and that saying is that 3 months later, he had been taken by a rare disease, a really tragic disease that we still don't have a cure for. And they simply call it Walter Payton disease now. It's obviously a technical name. But he was a great example of vision and creating paths and exercising his scope, his sense scope. And he let his mind get better and better. And with practice, all these superpowers, use that plasticity to get better. And his ability to craft a path before he was even aware of it created a situation where he didn't even have to think when he ran down the field. And that's what we're going for in a work life, is that we can know what we're doing so much that we don't even have to think about it, because we've created this and exercised this ability to craft a path and pursue that path. And so I want you to think about that this week. Think about what you can do to never skip a day and how you can practice what you do with a lot of difficulty, because difficulty was his friend. Pain was his friend. Challenge was his friend. Ease was his enemy. And what you can do. and dedicate yourself to taking those initial steps as often as you can to that vision. Now, path pursuit is an ability that's crafted by the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia and hippocampus. And once you get that destination in your head, your brain starts laying out a dozen paths, as I said earlier, and it senses the obstacles and it reroutes. And what I am suggesting today is that if you have a minute, think of the daily that will produce a weekly result in this area, this focus, this priority. Then think about how you put 12 weeks together to arrive at a 13th week, which is a quarter, and what that step might look like. And then I want you to think about what you should pull off, the major leap this year, and how that would contribute to 5 years out, and then look beyond the horizon. And it starts to become more about who you want to be and how you want to contribute to this humanity and planet. When you get out that far, something will happen inside you. I know it did for me. So one of the things that is really interesting is how I discovered the reality of that. I have a son, Calvin. He belongs to a band, and he's an artist called Caljo. And he is an emerging pop artist. In fact, his music underlies a lot of the music that we present on this podcast. And he said to me one day, in the beginning when he started out, he was feeling like he needed to have more attendees at a concert. He had a short-term notice that he had an opportunity to appear in a small venue, and he needed more attendees at that venue. And so he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I sensed the discouragement in his voice, which will happen in any career, especially that one. And it came before all the excitement that he has now, but it really bothered me because I'm his father and I love him tremendously. And I said, I'm going to cancel my meetings and I'm going to get you some listeners for that concert. And I'm going to get you some followers, because you're going to need followers to get their friends to come. You're going to need followers that most people attend a concert. It's been shown, people study this sort of thing. Most people attend a concert because a friend or a family member tells them that they should go with them. And so there's kind of this first step there too. And then if people are aware of it, they're more likely to say, I heard of him somewhere. I saw him on Instagram somewhere. And so they're more likely to go. And so followers is tremendously important, both on Spotify and Instagram and all the other social media. And so I said, I'm canceling my meetings, and I don't know, I got to think through how to do this for a minute, but I'm going to go get you some followers and I'm going to go get you some attendees. And I thought about it. And I remember an exercise I did back when I was doing an innovation workshop on pivots. Because, hey, when you make these plans, you better be ready, and you need to know how to create an effective pivot. And so I led the largest ever study of award-winning pivots. And so one of the exercises we would do, and still do with clients that want to do that, one of the exercises puts you out in the community and doing various things. And I'll spare you the detail of that for today. But it forces you to talk to strangers in various settings, in one of three settings. And you have to talk to these strangers in a particular way, which is logical and socially acceptable, but it's scary. And I've done that so many times, I just am not scared about doing it. And so I looked around, I looked at some of the places that would, in events that would make a lot of sense right then today, searched and found where I needed to go. And I went, and in 5 hours, I got 250 to 300 listeners. Immediately calculated that day. Like if I did a session of 5 hours doing the same thing, I could get him 500, maybe. Certainly the whole day, I could get him 500 a day. That's interesting. Something really powerful happened in my mind right at that minute that I did that math. My brain subconsciously took that scenario and applied it to this hobby podcast that used to be a hobby and now it's serious. I have gone in the beginning with this podcast. I did 3.5 years not caring about it at all. All I was really doing was interviewing amazing leaders to get a clip for a workshop or a speech. And then I put it on YouTube just to somewhere, because that's what people were doing. And I had no vision of being an influencer or anything. I didn't even care if anyone went to them, frankly. But I just put them there. And over about 3.5 years, I got 140 people following. That's it. 140, which may sound like a lot to some of you, but that's nothing on YouTube. And none on any other platform, because I wasn't even doing the other platforms. That day, when I got Calvin 300, 250, 300 new followers for his work, something happened in my mind. My brain created a path almost instantly. It nearly did the math for me. I said, okay, let's see. If I did 500 followers for what I do, this podcast, over 50 weeks, what is that? Well, I don't have time to do that. I started feeling the red light show up. I was like, okay, this is just hypothetical. There's no red light here. There's green light, hypothetical. So what if we create a path, as you're suggesting, mind, what does that look like? Well, 500 in 50 weeks is 25,000. That's a real plan. So what happened next is the point of telling you this story. I had a priority, and it was all clients, no podcast. In fact, I'd been told it takes so much work, and it is an extraordinary amount of work. That's why most of us are starting to try to charge them for premiums. We need help to do this work and take this time. And so what happened in my mind was I thought, wow, I could really take that step. I could craft a week where I'm working weekends and a couple of nights, and I could put together a scenario where I get 10,000 followers and get them to listen to a healthy degree. What's magical about that, I already knew this before that moment. I knew that 10,000, just because of listening to people and being aware of podcasting, I realized that video podcasts, if they can get to the point where they have 10,000 free listeners, then they can try to sell and find advertisers that YouTube doesn't provide, or Spotify doesn't provide, or Apple doesn't provide, but their own. So they get to keep all the money. And that seemed interesting. Wow, I really could do this. Suddenly it became a joint priority. Now I do the podcast mostly still on Fridays, weekends, and nights, and take care of my clients the other 4 days, full time almost. But this created a sense of energy in me that I still can't shake. It has endured. Like, you take the first step and you let your path pursuit superpower imagine the steps and see them in your mind, how to get to that ultimate destination that you know is out there, that you've seen in your own mind. What you have inside you, which is the same equipment that I have, and it's called a system for path pursuit. Really crazy things happen to your energy and your surges of dopamine at moments when you're going to work on it. Listen, I have 10,000 people that I need to help, and it's not going anywhere. And it creates paths for you, and it gets rid of, without you even knowing, it gets rid of the ones that are stupid. It looks just like GPS. GPS is not just something that came out of the blue. Just like the flip phone or other inventions, it's something that's happened in someone's imagination first, and steps have been taken. And then what happens is they feel a surge of adrenaline. And we're going to talk to, in a few episodes, we're going to actually publish an old interview I did with the inventor of this GPS system, Brad Parkinson. And he not only led like path pursuit, he accomplished GPS, the ultimate path pursuit system. So we're gonna talk about that in a later episode. What happens inside of you, this surge, I call the turbocharge. And we all know it as dopamine. And what you may not recognize is that dopamine is not just some drug that you take to feel better. It can do a little of that. By far, that's a tiny part of it. There's other things that make you feel better. What dopamine is all about, that you all hear about, it's part of the striatum and the motor cortex system joining together to create this turbocharge of readiness. That you're just ready at the starting line, and you're ready to hit the pedal to the metal and then amp it up. And when you're in the middle of the project and you take that first step, after the first step, progress itself creates the energy. Motion turns effort into energy. And it takes you past the difficulties and through the difficulties. You still experience them, just like you still experience pleasure without dopamine, but you carry through. So that system of turbocharging is one we're so and always familiar with, and it's one we're most, aware of in our daily lives. Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. But that baby step in that motion can really, of an early win, can create that dopamine. Now, one of the other interesting things about the turbocharged system that you have that you may not notice or know is that when you get that rush, not only does it energize you or prepare you to take motion and take action, but it helps you focus better. Your ability has a heightened focus in the sense scope. So when you have that dopamine surge, your sense scope and your ability to focus on those points is really acute and tight and strong and focused. So you have this bias for speed, because when you focus on that, like the study we talked about, you anticipate less time, and then your system overloads the available energy for you because it thinks it's going to take less time and it can allocate that right now. And so it's going to take you also through the persistence part as well. And if you are persistent, intentionally activating these systems, not through just chemicals and things like that, but through behavior, what you'll see, as Huberman points out, is that plasticity actually happens not just in your brain with the abilities that you're executing, but plasticity happens with your turbocharged system, with the dopamine, with the epinephrine that we're going to talk about in a second, and the other parts of your turbocharged system. So that's a really interesting. Now, one of the interesting studies that's been done about our turbocharged system is we have a lot of cousins mammals, and human studies have been done too on this. And if you take any mammal and you put them in a room and you put it the other side of the room beyond their personal space, just beyond their personal space, not too far, and you put all the things that are desirable, food, etc., you put them on the other side of the room, they'll go to them. Duh. But what happens when you take away the dopamine? If you chemically take out and block the turbocharge, the dopamine, etc., it's interesting. Mammals do not take one step towards those desirable goals. Whether meaningful, exciting, they don't take any steps. This chemical and set of systems that operates with it and those that coordinate with it are powerful turbochargers. And they didn't, taking them away, it's really interesting in this study, taking them away in the study did not reduce the amount of pleasure or the positive results or the meaningful ripple. It just didn't let them take a step. It didn't ready them to take a step. And so that is what's going on inside you. So you have something that's trying to get you to take one step, to get one step outside of your personal space. Take the step now in your personal space and get it to drive you to the second step. And that second step is where momentum starts. And motion, movement, and events create momentum in the same direction. And so you've got to take the first step so that you take the second, and then things get easier. We've all been in that situation. We've all tried to take the first step. You see everything else. You don't want to do something for 10 minutes and you take the first step, and the next thing you know, you've been doing it for 4 hours because you just can't stop. So it's really a powerful system to take that first baby step. Take the first baby step this week on something that is critically important to you, that you think is extremely important in other people's lives too. Last, the turbocharge. Last superpowers, fascinating. I love this. It gets full circle back to where we started. I call it the cooperative body. This is why. That sounds like a strange name, but here's why. Noah Harari, as I mentioned, said that we are the most flexibly cooperative animal on Earth by far. And many people have demonstrated this in various ways. While other social animals, like our cousins, the great apes, are super social, intensely detailed about their social behavior, they also are highly instinctual. For example, we meet together and go to a football game with 100,000 people in it, if we're in Michigan, or in the SEC, and we don't kill each other. Well, there might be a punch, someone's thrown out. No one generally dies. You take 10 of the great apes and you put them on the field in that same stadium the next day, and you put one stranger there, they'll rip it apart. It's not even close to how cooperative we are. Sometimes we don't act to our level. Sometimes we don't think the other person is being cooperative, but they are being very cooperative based on what they have inside them. Now, they have a step up, and you have a step up, and I have a step up, and we can be more cooperative. And we have been fortunate and blessed to gain a super set of powers that involves cooperating. And one of them is our body. So we're going to talk about both of those. So that not only is it a prefrontal cortex or TBJ thing, it's an oxytocin, and it's also your physical stature. What do I mean? Well, let's talk about that. Both really matter because nothing meaningful is ever achieved alone in the human realm. It's true. People study it. There are several books. There are several studies. I've seen it in a long career. Really, no one really does something great and large all by themselves. They may think they did. You may think they did. When you investigate it and study it, as I have tens of thousands of times in studies, you realize that no one does anything alone, all alone. They may even look like it, but they don't. So what are we talking about? Well, this flexible cooperation that we do, even though we don't think we're doing it, allows us to shift roles. Like, you can go on a project and you can be the boss. You can be in charge. But then when something happens that needs to happen in a different set of systems than you are a specialist or an expert at, you can put someone else in charge. If you're riding a bike up the canyon, you can be in a peloton, you can lead down first, but as they do, they switch roles. Now, the difference between us and geese that fly and do the same thing is that we think about what we're accomplishing in the various roles. We're not just all flying the same direction. We're all doing different things, which creates a scale. And when you can create a scale and become bigger than yourself, obviously bigger things can happen. But what's interesting is we can share the same aim. We are very good at no one seeing it. It hasn't even happened yet. We can all see the same scene beyond the mountains, beyond the horizon, that is positive place, positive people, positive plot or progressions. And we can see that and know that we're all heading there together. So I can put that other person in charge during the project for their part. I can put the other person, just like a jazz band. We can put different people in charge and it doesn't all fall apart. We are extraordinary at cooperating. Now, one of the other things that we do besides care about each other, besides, just one more thing about that. Babies, horrible Nazi experiments, died when they got everything they needed physically, but they didn't get what they needed from mother and social. They died. People in prison, what's the worst thing that can happen to them? They put them in solitary confinement. We are at our core built in our mind, and now I'll tell you how physically. So physically, we have a brain. We also have the voice box the vocal cords. We have what we need to speak, not in simple chirps that are general and pointing, but in sophisticated 600-page novels. We can communicate both verbally and with our mind, with our fingertips. We can create highly detailed. Nothing can do it but us. And it is so detailed and imaginative that we truly have a cooperation superpower that is our language and physical language capability. Now, we are also standing upright. We stand upright, and it gives us the ability to see. Anyone who's walked their dog realizes that in spite of their tremendous smell, they're missing that squirrel 2 blocks away, and I can see it from right where I am. Why? Because I'm not a foot off the ground. There's not a bush in the way. There's not a car parked in the way. So height and our visual capability to see each other over most things that are natural in the world is an extremely interesting thing. You can see whether someone's in their office because you can see over the desk. Your dog has no idea. So your height is a tremendous advantage. Your dexterity. The human hand is not only an opposable thumb. We've heard about that. We use tools early. That's great. But we have this fine dexterity. The detail we can create with our mind can be created with the fingertips at an astonishing level compared to anything on earth. And so to accomplish the physical things, to dial a phone, to do all the things that we do when we work is an extraordinary feat. And when you add all that detail to the scalability, you get something like I saw when I stayed at the Marriott across in New Jersey. And every morning I decided on a trip, so half business, half pleasure, I went and I took the ferry across the river, and I could see the full half of that island. If you haven't done that, you should do that. It's great to drive over the bridge, but it blocks your view a lot. And it's still a similar situation. But when you take that ferry, you can see long ways up and down the whole coast of that, and it's a clear day, and you're going closer and closer to these enormous buildings. Yes, ants do that at scale, but not to the level of detail. Think of the HVAC system. Think about the amazing interior design. Think about everything that happens in those buildings that we as humans are able to accomplish. It's unbelievable what we can do. We are flexibly cooperative, but we also have the body to do it. And so what does this mean for this week? Well, I want you to think. Just look around the office because you can. You can see other people around. I want you to go on Zoom if you have to. I want you to think about the people you work with. And think about giving someone a different role. You can give them a role of a mentor. You can give them a role in a specialty. You can elevate their leadership if you lead the organization. Think about practicing switching roles. Think about something that you could be taking a back seat and supporting someone who's better at it than you, and you both could be more successful rather than you struggling to do it alone. That's what we can do. Those are the types of things we can do. Now, before I close, I want to give you a quick reminder and list so that you remember some of these things. I want you to remember that you have a warning signal inside you. And not only is it flashing alarms when it's sitting idle, when that's necessary, it's hardly necessary in this modern age. But when it is, heed it. Now, it also will stop you from doing things. Don't skip that message and go around the gate. Most importantly, do as Jim Olsen did. When the green light goes on, you count to 5 seconds and you start that task before you count to 5. Second superpower you have a value stamp. The most powerful part of the value stamp is meaningful valence about the important things. And what does that mean? That means things that you can impact, that ripple, and it's about them and theirs and the future and their benefit. That's the most important stuff. The exciting me, mine, now is less important in the value stamp. What about the sense scope? The sense scope is a system you have where you can think about your immediate space and getting something, a step done right this second without waiting doing something so easy that you can't help but get that first baby step done. And then feeling and knowing what the next step is just outside your personal space, in the outward space that involves other people and impacts other things. And then remember, you're going to have a couple other stops. We're going to cover those in the premium action plan. But go beyond the horizon and imagine something big that you could be involved with or lead to get done. Then back into just before the horizon, something that you can see in your future that is big, that deserves a big leap forward. And that's your sense scope. Now, your imagined space is going to require some detail and a one-time loading of exciting emotions to create a vision that's real, that's going to happen. It's not a dream. It's detailed, it's real, you felt it. Feel it once, remember the detail, don't feel it a second time. Feel where you are in relationship to it until you arrive at that point. Then you also have a system that can create path pursuit. Even before you're aware of it, if you set that scene beyond the horizon, your brain will start calculating what needs to happen and if it's possible. And it gets rid of the versions that are not possible, and it leaves you with one or two that might be possible. And then you use your intellect and your intent to raise to consciousness what's the plan, what are the immediate plans, the intermediate plans, and the distant plan that I can pursue. And it'll create the path right to it. You have that ability. Now, you also, once you set that up and you take the first baby step, have a turbocharger. And that turbocharge is going to help you. When you have a tiny success and you already see the other successes are possible that get you all the way there, it endures and it keeps going. Finally, you are a cooperative body. Your organism, not just your brain, both your body and your mind are built to be flexibly cooperative at an astonishing level if you so choose to do it. So what do you do with all of this? You figure out how you can use each one and act on them and take the suggestions. Now, I'm going to tell you the end of the Richard story because it's relevant to all of this. Richard was invited to that contest, and sure enough, he struck several bullseyes and gave them to several people from his commoner town. But his imagination immediately got going with the possibilities. If he could do this with 2 or 3 people, what could he accomplish doing it with big crowds? And so he said, if I keep going, invite more people, and offer this to more people as I go through the different distances, in the different repetitions of the contest, and make it a thing, and invite the townsfolk that are related to each person to come see if they win it, I could hit it to give it. And the crowds would create quite an event, and the nobles would benefit, I would benefit, the people would benefit, and we would take this somewhere. And so he did. Now, there's a couple of details about this. Why do I tell you that simple little story? A couple of things. Bullseyes are just less than 2 inches. They've never changed. You go to a Target today, same size. Why? Why hasn't it increased? Because it's hard. Difficult things are valuable. Small focus is hard. It's valuable. The other thing to think about is that what the bullseye symbolizes, that coin, the coin that he hit, whether it's a 5 shilling or the one that you put in your office, that coin is less than 2 inches because it's hard, but it also has 2 sides. And the priority matters, according to our research and many other people's research. If you doubt this fact, go read Adam Grant's Give and Take. He has a whole book full of studies that are like ours. The studies say that if you focus on the them, theirs, and the future, you focus on the people that you're ideally suited to benefit, your ideal customer, your ideal neighbor, whoever it is that you can benefit. If you focus on them first, and you focus on an exceptional, precise outcome, not like service and just being nice, but really benefit, solve a problem, and create an amazing opportunity, help them make money, save money, whatever it is, if you help them and you do a great job at it, then the second side matters, which is you get to look out for your own tail. You have to make sure you're doing it profitably, or at least break even. You don't always have to give away the farm and damage your family's future, but you can keep that order straight. And studies show that when you have that order and priority straight, that better things happen for you in the long run. So the other thing that's really interesting about that story is that he imagined what could happen and what effect and what ripple did his path pursuit and turbocharge and cooperative crowds create. Well, the gentleman I'm talking about in reality was named Richard, but his legend became known as Robin Hood. I'm talking about Robin Hood. The only thing we know about Robin Hood is that his name was Richard, he was an archer, and he loved helping other people. And the rest of us have made up the legends like this one that talk about his helping other people. Your goals need to happen. Your goals are important because they do that. And I wish you the best. Thank you very much. As you just heard, we don't want the clarity you just gained to stop here. Join us for our premium action plan. If you've ever felt stuck between where you are professionally and who you are meant to be, this next part is for you. Go to boldencounters.tv and join our premium access and turn today's discovery into one clear step in the right direction this week. Again, go to boldencounters.tv to gain premium access. We work hard on this, but you get fewer ads, deeper insights, and guest guides in their expertise. Take a first step this week, but go to boldencounters.tv today to get started, and we'll see you inside Premium. Thank you so much for your support. You make this happen.
Even great leaders get stuck. Others thrive. I'm Mark Cook, New York Times bestselling author, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. Clients upgrade leaders' retreats and conferences with my 5-star keynotes and breakouts on Leaders Bold Encounters. Also, leaders get weekly consulting as they execute key steps. Plus, brief check-ins guarantee results, live or via Zoom. After turnarounds as chief executive and 9 global studies of 2 million award-winning leaders, I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands with my approach in over 50 cities worldwide. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Leaders create revenue breakthroughs and clients see new profits. Now let's lead with Bold Encounters today.